Tonight I'm going to deal with some questions I've had about people who come on as the Messiah themselves. They announce themselves, they proclaim prophecies, they declare declarations, they assume the identity of Messiah ben Yosef, sometimes ben David. And what do you do? Well, sitting in downtown Jerusalem at Nahar Shalom, I've met a lot of these guys. They seem to come through fairly regularly. I think they, to a T, they're all fitting to the Jerusalem syndrome package, if you will. But I try to talk to them, and get deeper. Because, there are good people inside those identities that they've tried to assume. And the truth is that every Jew has a spark of Messiah. And the Alter Rebbe of Chabad defines that in Tanya as the spark of Mesirat Nefesh that a Jew has for God, that spark that's willing to die for Hashem or the Jewish people. That spark was born in the beginning of creation. So as creation emerged into this bundle of light and life, it automatically created the opposite concept of the potential for death, and that meant the potential for being willing to die for Hashem. Rabbi Nachman defines this concept as a form of divine jealousy, that the messianic light is like a double-edged sword of jealousy for God. But nonetheless, what do you do with someone you love or a friend, or when you hear about these kinds of stories? Well, here it is in Israel, a Motzi Shabbat, and we've had a wonderful Shabbat, and we have friends coming by all the time, and you get these stories. And one fellow was declaring this week his messianic identity. And I said, what makes you that? What have you done? Well, you don't know. He starts to tell me. I said, you're right, I don't know. And he begins to speak about the prophetic things that he said. And I said, well, that's very impressive, the things that you said, the ones that have come true. But why does that make you Messiah? Well, because this is part of his work. And I asked, why do you need to announce it on the streets of Jerusalem and on Facebook and other places? And he was quiet for a minute. Why do people need to know? If you're it, you're it. And if you're it, why do you need to tell others? Well, people need to know. People need to know what? Your identity or the prophecies that you're saying? If the prophecies that you're speaking are for the betterment of the people, wonderful. And if they're warnings about the future, well, that's going to be a little more difficult, because there's all kinds of people out there prophesying doom, from Hollywood to Washington to London to the Vatican. Doom is a very popular subject, Fear itself is one of the prime motivators of humanity. And the governments know that, and the secret services know that, and so do the religious leaders. When you need something done, you make the people afraid. I think the Catholic Church has known this for centuries, millennium perhaps. And so doom as a concept is something that's been sold as part of a messianic scenario. Whereas in Judaism, we really don't dwell on this at all. We don't dwell on destruction because we've already been through it. We've been through the Holocaust. We've been through World War I. That was also a war against Amalek. The Gemara says, Germamia shel Edom, a grandson of Edom, would rule the world. If they were unified, they could destroy the world. So too the Talmud tells us. And that prophecy was written in the Talmud 2,000 years ago, and it became truth. It happened. But for a person to come along, I said to him, you have a spark of a prophet in you. It's a wonderful gift. But I think the question is to be more careful with how you use your gift. And afterwards he thanked me very much. And you could see the calm come over him. And you could see that edge of the need to be something slipped away. And he was his pleasant self again. So people need to be acknowledged for their gifts, and they also need to know how to use them properly. And if this fellow is the Messiah, well, that's God's business, isn't it? And we don't have to worry about it too much, but we certainly want to treat people with the respect that they actually need to heal. And when we do so, you see that they do heal a little bit. They might come back again with more proclamations, but it's a spark, the Rebbe says, that's been fanned into a great flame, that everybody has that spark, but when it's fanned too brightly, it can burn someone's external vessel, his everyday self, burn it out. And that's called ribui or, too much light. And so if every person modulates that light properly, they're healthy. But if the light of the Messiah in everybody's soul or in person's soul is exaggerated, well, then it produces these types of results. And that's why it often happens to tourists who show up to Jerusalem. They come here with expectations and fervor and love and desire, and they're Jews and Christians alike, and they get hit by the light of Jerusalem, and it basically overwhelms their vessel of consciousness. And they usually get better when they leave Jerusalem. Isn't that interesting? Because the volume on that spark is turned down. So if you've experienced this, then you should know that there's hope in building the vessel to hold the great light of your soul and to hold that spark of the divine that's in you. And the chief way we do it is by learning and living according to the Torah. Learning halakha, practicing halakha, and practicing humility first and foremost. So what will be with each of us, it's really not all in our hands. We have a free choice. We can choose to pursue a relationship with God that leads to this highest of levels. But we're not after identities. And God has plenty of messengers to do his work.